Hi, it's Dre Griggs of Obsidian Wisdom. Today we answer the question, how much money will I get after retirement? You already know it depends on a variety of factors, and there's really 5 that we're going to focus on today. I'll even end by giving you a couple of case studies so you can see what that number looks like. My goal today is to show you a couple of ways that you can quickly and easily figure out how much money you should expect to receive in retirement so that you can make any adjustments as you see fit. Now, of course, you could always just Google a retirement calculator. I have one on obsidianwisdom.com/resources. But if you just wanted to be able to take a sheet of paper out and a calculator, figure out the amount, we're going to be able to do that today. So the first of the 5 inputs for you to be able to determine how much money you should expect to have after retirement is going to be just where you're at now. It's going to be how much money you already have invested. This is important because it naturally depends on where we're starting at. Anytime that we're going to put a plan together, think of it like a map. Think of it like a GPS. I have to tell it 2 things. I have to tell it where I'm at, and I have to tell it where I want to be. And then if we can take into consideration the traffic and stoplights and highways and different things like that, but we always have to start with where we're at and where we're trying to be. And I know it feels simple and it can be sort of annoying, but we're going to talk about each of the 5 steps as necessary as they are. And so we need to know how much money that we have invested already. So you have to take the money that you have in your 401ks, you have to take the money you have in your IRAs, your Roth, and your different accounts, and you need to compile how much you have from these different income sources. Now, naturally, that could be a little bit difficult, so it may take a little bit of time, but that's okay. Give yourself the time. Don't stress yourself out by giving yourself a short timeline, and then you feel overwhelmed, and then you just kind of give up. But instead, give yourself a little bit of time. Give yourself a week or 2 weeks. Give yourself a month to put all these numbers together so that way you don't feel overwhelmed by the process. But we got to have a very accurate calculation of how much money we have in all of our accounts, in all of our investments. And if you're expecting additional sources of income from maybe a pension or an annuity or some sort of an inheritance, normally what we do is we're going to go ahead and decide how likely is this to be. So your Social Security, we're going to say that's very likely. So we're going to go ahead and have that amount added at the very end because we're going to turn this amount of investments and savings into an actual monthly income. And then once you have the monthly income, we can add Social Security back into it. We can add your annuity payments or your pension payments back into it because these are things that we believe are very likely to happen. But when it comes to things like an inheritance, you really have to ask yourself, how confident am I that I'm going to receive this amount of money, and how much is that amount of money going to be? Now, if that inheritance is just a large lump sum, then we can consider adding that into our savings and investments portion of our income sources. If that money is going to be allocated to some sort of a trust and you believe you're going to receive a monthly income, then you're going to have to take that amount and you're going to put it down at the bottom when we have the income sources, just the same as you would have done with your pension or your annuity. If it's an income, we just add it at the end. The second of your 5 calculations to determine how much money you're going to receive after retirement is your annual contributions. How much money do you plan on putting into that savings and investments every single year, every single month until you plan on retiring? Now, there's generally 2 ways to do this. The first is we can decide how much money we need in retirement, and then we can back into how much money that means we have to invest every single year, and then we just hit that number. The second is this is a reasonable amount of money that I am willing to commit, and I am confident that I can commit every single year towards my retirement. And then we can calculate how much money that will be when you retire. You can then decide whether you need to invest more or whether you need to make an adjustment on your lifestyle or whether you need to work a little bit longer. There are a lot of levers that you can use. If you're someone who feels very confident about your lifestyle, that this is what my retirement is going to look like, then we have to focus on how much money we're putting in. If we don't feel like retiring a year later, or we're not very interested in taking $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 off of whatever our trips and vacations are, then we need to say, okay, well, based on the amount of money that I need to have, I need to invest this amount. And then we're going to invest that amount. After you have your contributions, the third of the 5 calculations is going to be your time horizon, which is a very fancy way of saying how long until I retire? How many years am I going to be making these contributions? How many years is my money going to have to grow before I retire? That is what your time horizon is. So if you're going to retire in 10 years, then we're going to say 10 years. If you're going to retire in 15 years, we're going to say 15. If you're going to retire in 20, then we're going to say 20. It's just however long you plan on having your money invested. Our 4th calculation is going to be, what is my investment return? What can I expect to receive from my investments? If you expect to receive a 5% return on average or a 6 or an 8% return on average, the stock market generally hovers somewhere around that 8 to 9% on average. But based on your overall risk tolerance and the allocation of your portfolio, we can then say, based on this allocation in this portfolio, what is the average amount I can expect to receive? I'll put a link to another video where I go through 4 diversified asset allocations that get you relatively consistent returns that are over that 4%, because depending on your overall withdrawal strategy, which is our 5th calculation, we can then say, all right, well, I'm just going to use the 4% rule. And as long as I'm generating more than 4%, that means the amount of money that I take out each year, I am actually generating that exact same amount every single year for my investments, which means that I'm probably not going to run out of money during my lifetime in retirement. Now, of course, you and I know, and we do stress testing and different things. And I'll put a link to another video where I go step by step through creating a retirement plan. And we talk about stress testing, running Monte Carlo simulations, which is a very fancy way of saying we run 1,000 simulations and we see whether or not we run out of money in retirement. And as long as about 75-80% of the time we're able to say, I don't run out of money in retirement, we normally feel really good about our overall investment strategy. Now, I do know that there are some people that say, I don't feel very comfortable about 75-80% of the time, but those 20% are really crazy outliers. And that's why we normally are going to say, as long as I'm in that 75 to 80, sometimes I've even seen it where we go as low as 70, I feel really good. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't go up to 80, 90, 100%, but it does mean that it often requires more of us ahead of time as far as the commitment of time and resources, percentage of income, and things of that nature. Now, if you're someone who's interested in using a different withdrawal strategy, I'll put a link to a video where I go through several different strategies where you can decide which one makes the most sense for you. As far as today's calculations, we're going to use the 4% rule because it's going to be very easy for us to be able to follow it. But the withdrawal strategy can definitely vary depending on the amount of money that you have. Some of the withdrawal strategies require more money than others, but there are some withdrawal strategies that are safer and more conservative than others. And so it really just depends on how much money we have, what your risk appetite is, and a variety of other situations. But because for most people, the 4% rule is something that we're all familiar with and is very relatively easy to calculate, it's going to give you a good idea of where to start with. And so what we'll do, and I'll share my screen with you, is we'll take those 5 inputs and we'll do a couple of case studies. So with our first case study, we have someone with $100,000 currently saved. They plan to contribute $10,000 per year. They have 20 years until they retire, and they expect an average return of 6%. And then what you'll see is we need to, number one, calculate the future value of our current savings, which, as you can see on the screen, is just your future value equals your current savings times 1 plus your annual return, and then you raise that the number of years. That is going to be the formula that you would use. And so with our case study, we have $100,000, a 6% return in 20 years until retirement. And so you can see when you plug those numbers in, $100,000 times 1.06 raised to the 20th power is $320,000. You then move on to the second calculation, which is your future value of your annual contributions. And so we already know what we have currently saved and what that will generate simply by itself, where we don't contribute any money whatsoever, just what that amount will be. And we would have $320,000 when we retire in 20 years, as long as we average that 6% return. The next thing we have to calculate is the future value of our contributions. We said that we're putting $10,000 every single year in. So what you can see is that equals your annual contribution, which is $10,000, times 1 plus your annual return, which is going to be 6%, raised to the number of years, which is 20, minus 1 divided by your annual return, which we know is 6%. When you place that into it, you would then have $10,000 times, and then you see we have 1.06 raised to the 20th power minus 1 divided by 6%, which equals approximately $388,000. And then from there, we're able to calculate our total retirement savings, which is going to be our future value of our current savings, which was $320,000, plus the future value of our annual contributions, which is $388,000. So we can expect to have about $708,000 when we retire in 20 years. And from there, all we have left to calculate is our annual withdrawal. And we said we're going to use the 4% rule for our withdrawal strategy. And then what you can see here is that would be $708,000 times 4%, which equals $28,320 every single year. That is what you're able to withdraw as far as the money that you have calculated that you're going to be able to allocate towards your retirement. You can then add in the income that you'd receive from your Social Security. We know that on average, that's about $1,800 every single month, which annually is going to be about $22,000 a year. So we would take that $28,000, we would add $22,000 to that. If you have a pension or an annuity income, then you can take that amount and you can add that down here as well. You would just take the annual calculation of that, and then you would add the annual amount that you would receive in income, and that would be how much you should expect to receive every single year after you retire. Now I'll do one more case study and I'll change the numbers around a little bit where you can see how that amount changes depending on how much money you start with and how much you can expect to receive as far as your investments and your return. So in our second example, we have $150,000 currently saved. We plan on contributing $15,000 per year, and then we have 25 years until we retire with an average annual return of 8%. So we're invested a little bit more aggressively. We have a little bit more time before retirement, and we're starting with a little bit more money than we already have. And we're also going to contribute a little bit more. And then we're going to use those same formulas. So you see, we're going to first calculate our future value of our current savings, which is your future value equals your current savings times 1 plus your annual return, which in this case is going to be 8%. And then raise the number of years until you retire, which we have just said is 25. And so when you plug the numbers in, that's going to be $150,000 times 1.08 raised to the 25th power. And that's going to equal a little over $1 million. So you can see a couple things here. One is we just added 5 years, right? We went from 20 years to 25 years, and we just added 2% on our return and $50,000 on our investments. And these are all relatively small changes, but we were able to almost 3x the amount of money that we would have in retirement. Next, we need to calculate the future value of our annual contributions. And so we're going to say we have $15,000. We're going to multiply that by 1.08, which is going to be 1 plus the annual return, which we expect to be 8%. And then we raise that to 25, which is the number of years until our retirement. And then we're going to subtract that by 1 and then divide that by 8%. And then we'll multiply that by 1.08, and that's going to generate us $1.1 million. And then from there, we would add these two together to get our total savings, which is going to be $2.1 million. And then we'll use the 4% rule. So you'll take 2.1 million and multiply that by 4%, and that would be about $85,000 every single year. Now, the only thing that you need to remember is to increase the amount of money that you receive each year by inflation, or at least you should do it every 5 years if you want to, but you do need to take inflation in consideration because inflation is going to be eating away at what you can purchase with that amount of money. To where what I could purchase with $85,000 today, in 17 to 20 years with an inflation rate of roughly 3%, I can expect my purchasing power to be cut in half, which is a very fancy way of saying that what I could buy today for $100, I would need $200 in 20 years to buy that exact same item. So we can all think of something that the price went up, whether that was purchasing an automobile or purchasing a house or filling up your gas tank or buying food. We know that the price of things have gone up, which means it's not in your best interest to simply ignore inflation. Inflation is a real thing, and it's something that we would normally keep track of. And so what you would do in the 4% rule, instead of increasing it by 4% next year, you might increase it by 4.03% next year to account for inflation. Now, that amount is going to be relatively small in the early going, but if you increase it by that 3% every single year, it does add up. And it does become something that we do want to consider in our retirement. Hopefully you notice by staying consistent with your contributions and smart with your investment choices, then you're able to significantly boost your retirement savings so that you can have a wonderful and wealthy retirement. If you made it to the end of the video, I just want to say thank you and I appreciate you. You probably noticed that my voice isn't the exact same. I was a volunteer counselor at Florida Bible Camp, and I was out there screaming and cheering for the kids, and I ended up losing my voice a little bit. And so thank you for your patience with me. I hope you found value in the video. If you did, simply like and subscribe so you continue receiving valuable insights on how to create your own wealthy retirement system. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.